Let's discuss Teemo Jungle and what makes it so different now compared to prior seasons, as well as anything else that's crucial to know for anybody wishing to pick him up.
Before we begin, I want to draw your attention to the few facts about myself. Since Season 4, I've been perfecting my craft on Teemo and playing League of Legends, through extensive guides, spreadsheets, in-game overlays, and many other projects. For numerous seasons, my highest rank has been unwillingly Diamond 3 and Diamond 4, until I finally determined that rank was not something that I cared about after having a minor mental breakdown. Nor do I believe that you should care about it if you're not having fun doing it, especially with how much of a cesspool this game truly can become for you and your mental health. Regardless of whether you're up against a bronze player, a platinum player, or even a diamond player, you can make anything work as long as you challenge yourself to do the best at every occasion. It doesn't matter if it's a normal game or a ranked game, you're getting better on Teemo and slowly better as a person.
So you might be wondering, why play Teemo Jungle over one of his more conventional roles like top, mid, or support? The thing about Jungle is that it has natural sustainability. You don't require Riftmaker in the early stages of the game like you do in the laning phase versus heavy poke matchups or even heavy fighters, where oftentimes you feel like Fleetfoot is a mandatory rune for survival. It provides a ridiculous amount of mobility and the ability to be more impactful in a game rather than sitting in the island known as top lane. The jungle pets, particularly Gustwalker, provides consistent movement speed that increases your base movement speed upwards to 600 consistently throughout the mid game and even into the late game, only being empowered further upwards to 800 if you're able to get a Cloud Dragon or a Cloud Dragon Soul. You can take summoners like Teleport Smite or even Ghost Smite over Flash Smite, while I do see myself taking the insane pressure of 180 second cooldown Ignite Smite rotations that have always been off cooldown by the time that you reach your designated lane for the assisted kill. So in contrast to the laning phase, in which the highest that you can get on your own is around 473 movement speed, it's basically a role for individuals who love being high on mobility without having to give up your actual damage to make it happen. It's a significant leap while relying on the items and interactions that we have to utilize. Where even if you're capable of snowballing and gaining complete control over your opponent, they can simply leave for a quick roam to get a shutdown and get ahead of you, or they can simply scale into the late game to make you feel obsolete when you clearly had a massive lead. Whereas if you did the same to the opposing jungler, you'd be surprised at how much actual impact you have once you've acquired complete control over their jungle, your jungle, his allies, and the objectives. When you're continuously on their ass with flawless rotations of their jungle timers and shroom tracking, it's nearly impossible for them to recover.
Let's get the runes and stuff out of the way now, rather than wasting any more of your time. The runes of choice are Press the Attack, as it is a common rune combination, while also being very powerful for yourself and for your allies. It's not because I or any of us have a bias towards any other runes.
For example, Dark Harvest is a very common jungle playstyle, but the whole purpose of Dark Harvest is to have somebody that you can constantly stack throughout the entire game. So unless you're capable of being in everyone's lane throughout the entire game against low HP champions while also managing to farm consistently on rotation, you're never going to get the full potential out of that rune compared to being something like a Teemo support or a Teemo top, especially if you are a relatively passive player trying out jungle for the first time. Because you want to get out of the game as soon as possible, and Dark Harvest is a snowballing rune as well as a late game scaling rune, Press the Attack is a snowballing rune while also a early, mid game, and late game scaling rune. It allows you to do so more efficiently without having to rely on snowballing or having to play out a really long game. But if you do try to take it seriously and strive for ranks, you're doing yourself a disservice by playing Dark Harvest, similar to how Aerie is a very good early game rune and a learning rune, but terrible into the late game and higher ranked games.
Teemo can always remain at 100% health due to his ability to kite and fight while also sustaining himself off of his jungle pet's auto attacks, while also being able to blind a camps for a good 4 seconds. But most of his opposing junglers do not have this luxury, and will remain at low health unless you have the natural sustainability in their kits. These champions include Nunu, Fiddlesticks, Master Yi, and a few others, which is the whole point of playing Teemo Jungle aggressively.
Nash's Tooth and Kraken Slayer are the items that you rush into to spike hard on your auto attack damage and attack speed, which helps you get around more effectively as you ramp up your mobility over time, while still managing to scale the rest of your skills and poison over time because you're actually investing in a stat that benefits your kit as a whole. These items have been through numerous updates alongside Static Shiv and other completely broken items that were abused and had to be gutted to the ground, and they've gotten nothing but good adjustments ever since, making it ridiculous how people have managed to avoid them as core integral parts to Teemo's build, most notably Kraken Slayer, since while it largely scales with AD, it also has a rather strong scaling rate for AP.
As previous experience with this item has shown me, it is also a very misunderstood item. It's not considered an on-hit item, but rather an on-attack damage item, making items like Thornmail easier to deal with because it doesn't reflect as much damage as a Blade of the Rune King,
dishing out over 1000 base AD on your 3rd or 6th auto attack, or if you stack a prior on a tower or a minion every 1st and 4th auto attack, with no changes to your AP build, making it much more difficult for your opponents, particularly Hex Drinker rushers, to build against it, and offering you more counter ways to dealing with these increasingly annoying AP mitigation items. This allows you to shred Baron or Dragon while also having far more control in a 1v1 or even a 1v2 situation where you find yourself getting locked down consecutively, regardless regardless of how defensively you play with your shrooms. This does not sacrifice ability power because you're not going into full AD, nor are you going into full tank, but rather a hybrid of both surrounded by ability power. It even goes so far as not requiring Riftmaker in the first place if you do prefer an item like Leandri's. You can take it and it won't change anything outside of the playstyle needs by not attacking head-on and playing more around your shrooms for damage rather than for kiting purposes. Riftmaker excels in long engages and up close and personal fights with mages and extended fight champions, where you can shred them before they can burst you down. Whereas if you try this type of playstyle with a shroom playstyle, you die quickly because you can't survive an all-in burst without an item like Zhonya's Hourglass, which is frequently ineffective because of a stun or because your allies have abandoned you the second you've activated it. I really feel that on Teemo, consistency is considerably more beneficial than long cooldown durations that prohibit you from acting when you need to. As a result, an item like Deadman's Plate is significantly more effective for an all-around item for armor in the jungle. Teemo has everything he needs because he's getting a steady amount of bonus movement speed, and the item grants him a whopping 40 flat movement speed, which is amplified tremendously through the jungle's effects. One final point to mention is how diverse this build can actually be. Because you don't need many items to boost its overall damage, you have upwards to 3 or 4 situational options to choose from, whereas builds like Shrooms or Bursts require so many and frequently leave you with 1 or 2 options to choose from, which includes selling your boots to replace that item. Tracking and denying the opposing jungler with as much pressure and rotations as possible is very important, while also supporting your allies in between these rotations. This is what this jungle pathing entails. Because we want to play aggressively, we will be adopting the vertical top and invading top strategies to maximize our chances of controlling the game before the game even starts. If you're on the blue start, you'll be invading with your teammates on the enemy's red top side, rather than the widely attempted invades bot side blue or bot side red. Nobody expects Teemo to play like Shaco or Kayn, and so your opponents will think the game will be an easy one, even refusing to ward their red or even defend it by sitting in the bush, especially for lower ranked players below diamond, which usually opens it up for a free kill or just to control the map. Invade their red and work your way down to the raptors. Ward the bush, and when raptor is dead, which only takes a few auto attacks, a smite, and a blind, finish off the mini raptors, and by minute 2 minutes and 30 to 2 minutes and 40, the enemy should be around the corner coming into the raptor pit, which you will have vision of while also finishing off their krugs around the corner. If you see them doubling back through the bush, you'll know that they're going towards your jungle because there's nothing bot side for them to acquire right now. If they don't show up, you can expect them to have invaded your jungle, which you should ping your mid and your bot so that they can probably deal with it. You'll finish your rotation and gank top with your first ignite, followed by blue, scuttle, mid, scuttle. Following that, you complete a full rotation of the remaining camps and a final gank top, since ignite will be off cooldown by then, in which you repeat this process following the spawning of the camps, generally attempting to intercept the enemy jungler to put him heavily behind. We will use a half vertical top rotation with a red start, so start with red, krugs, and raptors, kiting and blinding most of the damage, conserving your smite for the raptors, and immediately upon leveling up off of them, make your way to the enemy's wolves or the enemy's blue, as the opponent will either be there every time at 50% HP or be on their way mid or bot for a gank. You can either take their entire jungle or go for the kills whenever you meet them there. Following this, you take the same path as the invasion plan. Blue, scuttle, mid, scuttle, rotate back the top for the last ignite, then back to base for another rotation of the same camps, attempting to push your opponent further behind. While Teemo isn't the ideal jungle to do this with, it's highly effective because nobody expects him to play so early like this. You can definitely try this on champions who are better suited for the jungle, but I do find that this role is much better and more fun on him and less irritating than topside, where even if you do well and carry, you can't even put a single bit of that impact from your lane into the game without the help and assistance of other team members. In terms of how well this works, it's entirely dependent on your rank. It's a rather static and constant strategy that anyone from iron to diamond would have difficulty identifying, growing more easy to counter from diamond and upwards. That is the playstyle of ignite and smite rotations, as it's all about being overly aggressive and taking control to make it nearly impossible for them to make a comeback. This is what distinguishes Teemo players. It makes no difference who you are or what rank you hold. You can make anything work and try out new and differing techniques all of the time to keep things feeling fresh and riveting, rather than repeating the same boring strategies that progressively grow out of date as time passes. Even if you can still make them work, you should never push them onto other players. Let them experiment on what works for them, because that is what they feel more comfortable on, rather than the massive amount of differing builds top Teemo players play, because all that does is confuse them.